Welcome back. You're watching Credlin. Well, Attorney General Nicola Cash is pressing ahead with plans to establish a complaints body for federal judges. It follows the resignation of Senior Federal Court Judge Joe Harmon after an independent investigation found he had acted inappropriately towards two women. For more on this, I'm joined by Legal Affairs Correspondent for the Australian newspaper, Nicola Berkovic. Nicola, thank you for your time. I want to ask you about the status quo. Right now, what happens if a federal judge is accused of inappropriate behaviour?
So right now in the federal jurisdiction, unlike in, say, New South Wales, there's no independent complaints body that litigants or others can turn to. What happens is you would lodge a complaint with the court. Usually that would go to the Chief Justice or the Chief Judge in this case. They would decide whether the complaint is something he should just dismiss straight away or whether it's a complaint that has legs. In this case with Joe Harmon, he decided to set up an independent conduct committee to investigate these complaints because he decided they were serious enough to warrant that sort of treatment. And three judges were brought in from the Victorian, retired judges were brought in from the Victorian Supreme Court to handle this complaint. So it was at arm's length. But what judges, the legal profession, academics, it's almost unanimous at the moment, the calls for an independent body that can handle complaints about federal judges. We've had countless judges who've come under scrutiny, and really what people are calling for is an independent body that can look at these complaints, decide whether there's a problem with a particular judge, either due to their behaviour or their capacity to do their work, and to investigate sometimes what's underlying. It could be a mental health issue. It could be, the judge is not up to the job. And in New South Wales, the body has been extremely successful in some cases, quietly investigating a judge's behaviour, in some cases perhaps suggesting to the judge that it might be an idea to quietly retire or step down if it seems they're really not up to the job. And the key is this is in New South Wales, they are it's a member of the judicial arm of government. So it's not the executive, it's not the parliament stepping in and handling these complaints and trampling on the court's independence. It's an independent body, but that is part of the judicial arm of government.
Yeah, it was a separation of powers would make, the executive of government or the parliament stepping in a real issue. And I guess people probably don't understand or may not realise that judges are appointed for a very long period of time, particularly if they're young. I mean, Justice Edelman, I think, when he went to the High Court, mid-40s. Now, he'll be there for a couple of 3-4 decades. So that's another issue too. There's not much renewal of a judge's contract until they get to retirement age, is there?
Absolutely. So if there are problems with the judge, it's extremely difficult to do anything about it. They can only be removed for proven misbehaviour or incapacity, and that's by both houses of parliament. So really what a judicial commission could do is, investigate a judge's complaints against a judge and really look at whether that judge needs additional education, whether perhaps they need assistance for their mental health, whether their behaviour is completely unacceptable, and perhaps try to deal with it in that way. Because, the independence of the judiciary is a fundamental, protection that we have within our system of government. But sometimes it's a double-edged sword. So in this case, Joe Harmon was just 57 but he has chosen to retire. But he could have been there for another 13 years, and it is very difficult to sack a judge.
To remove them. Well, let's go to another issue too. Environment Minister today, Susan Lee, said she will appeal a federal court decision finding that she has, as Minister, a duty of care to protect children from the effects of climate change. Judge Justice Bromberg made the ruling yesterday in response to an action brought by 8 school children challenging the expansion of a coal mine near Gunnedah in New South Wales. Now, Justice Bromberg is a former candidate for ALP pre-selection. He didn't get it. He stayed in the bench in the legal world rather than go to Parliament. I have to put that out there because I think that should be known by my viewers. What did you make of yesterday's ruling?
Well, I don't think there's any surprise that this decision has been appealed. I think that was expected. It's a decision that could have wide-reaching implications. What he's found is that the minister has a duty of care that relates to carbon dioxide emissions. So the release of carbon dioxide into the Earth's atmosphere. So, I mean, this could really affect any mining project, any major emitting project. And really, I think, we want politicians to be in charge of the law in this area. So this is a decision that obviously environmental activists have welcomed, and we want our environmental laws to be stringent, to be strict, and we want obviously people who are making decisions about things like coal mines to take into effect things like climate change. That seems obvious, but here what he's found is something more novel, which is that the people making these decisions have a duty of care to prevent harm or injury to people far off into the future, which is a novel concept, obviously.
Novel as being kind, and of course it sits above now all the requirements that go through a parliament that have the scrutiny and are voted on in terms of the underlying environmental laws. There's now this added layer, so good on Susan Lee for appealing that. Just before we go, this issue overnight, the United Nations Human Rights Committee, the Morrison government was taken to task by a number of organisations pleading with the Morrison government to lift the age of criminal responsibility from about 10, I think it is in most jurisdictions, to 14. The issue, of course, is the Morrison government can note it, but the minimum age of criminal responsibility is the Crimes Act. The Crimes Act is the states. Where's this up to?
Well, there's no doubt about it. This is an issue that is up to the individual states to modify their laws. No one wants to see 10-year-olds sitting in jail rather than, getting the help that they need in their lives to address whatever underlying problems is causing criminal behaviour. But it is up to the states to modify their laws, even if the Commonwealth decided, absolutely this is something we need to change overnight. It's not something they could change overnight if they wanted to, but they could, if they wanted to, take a real strong leadership stance in this area. Just today, we've had Michaelia Cash trying to lead the states in terms of coercive control, which is a form of domestic violence laws, and that's another area of criminal law where she's trying to corral the states to take certain consistent positions. So if she wanted to, she could do the same in this area, and they're very cogent reasons to not apply criminal responsibility to people whose brains have not yet developed to the point that they should be held criminally responsible. But, the Council of Australian Governments has been looking at this issue. There's no easy answers that, if young people do commit crimes and they are found to be aware of their own wrongdoing, well, it is, these are things that affect other people in the community. Crime affects everyone in the community. So we really need other things in place. But there's very strong reasons not to treat young people who are so young, under the age of 14, as criminals and then expect them to go on and have productive lives.
All right, Nicola Berkovic, thank you for clarifying all of that, and thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
I do always think of that poor little boy, the young 2-year-old who was stolen away from his parents in London or in Britain somewhere. Remember that, out of the shopping centre by 2 boys who were about 10 years of age, and he was bludgeoned to death. So I do think that we don't want to see young people in jail, but we don't want to see young people commit crimes either.